Boss challenges. Black girl to fix supercar. Her truth shocks everyone. A 13-year-old girl walked into a garage, picked up a wrench, and within days exposed a nationwide auto fraud scheme that top engineers couldn't see. They laughed at her, underestimated her, tried to silence her, but what she revealed destroyed reputations, saved countless jobs, and rewired the future of diagnostics. Who is Ava Reed? And how did she outsmart an entire corrupt system with nothing but courage, code, and conviction? Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping true stories like this one. You won't believe what's coming next. Ava Reed arrived at the Apex Auto Garage like she did every school day. Backpack slung over one shoulder, curls still damp from her rushed shower after gym class, and the smell of engine grease oddly comforting in the late afternoon air. Her sneakers squeaked faintly as she walked past rows of hydraulic lifts and scattered toolboxes, weaving her way toward the back where her father, Isaac Reed, was hunched over the open hood of a dusty Ford F-150. The sound of classic rock buzzed from a hanging speaker near the ceiling, competing with the occasional clang of a dropped wrench or the hiss of a pneumatic drill. "Hey, Dad!" she called, setting her bag down beside a rolling stool. Isaac looked up, sweat dotting his temples. "You're early." "Math quiz ended early," Ava replied, already pulling her sleeves up and slipping into her oil-stained gloves, the same ones she'd secretly customized with conductive thread to tinker with wiring more precisely. She'd barely taken 2 steps toward the tool cart when a strange hush rolled across the garage like a thundercloud. The music cut. Tools stopped clinking. Every mechanic lifted their head. A black SUV with chrome trim and windows tinted darker than midnight had just pulled up outside. The driver's door opened with the slow deliberateness of someone who liked the sound of tension being built. Calvin Rhodes stepped out. If there was a man in the city that mechanics loathed and feared in equal measure, it was Rhodes. Polished shoes on garage floors, silk ties in the company of grease-stained overalls. He never quite belonged here, and maybe that's why he loved being here so much. Rhodes owned Apex Auto and 46 other garages in the metro area. But he didn't run them to repair cars. He ran them to squeeze profits, firing people like they were replaceable bolts and treating community mechanics like pawns in his kingdom of chrome and debt. "Surprise inspection," he announced, his voice slick with the syrupy cheer of someone who enjoyed delivering bad news. "Don't all look so nervous." Isaac's face turned pale under the overhead light. Ava instinctively stepped back, sensing the shift in the air. "Rhodes," Isaac said, clearing his throat. "We weren't expecting—" "That's the point of a surprise, isn't it?" Rhodes interrupted, eyes already scanning the space like a hawk over a chicken coop. "And what's this?" His gaze landed on Ava. "A child?" he added, voice rising just enough for every worker to hear. "In my garage? During an official audit?" Ava froze, her hands still gripping the edge of the tool tray. Around her, the silence thickened. Isaac stepped in front of her quickly. "She's just visiting, after school. She helps me organize parts sometimes. Is this a daycare now, Isaac?" Rhodes cut in, a sneer tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Or maybe we're doing some sort of community outreach? Adorable." A few of the younger mechanics looked away, uncomfortable. Ava's cheeks burned, but she didn't say a word. "You want to know why this garage's numbers are down?" Rhodes said, slowly turning to face the gathered staff. "Because we've got kids playing with wrenches and grown men playing house." Ava flinched, but she didn't lower her eyes. Rhodes noticed. "Oh? What's your name, princess?" "Ava," she said clearly, even though her heart was racing. "Well, Ava," Rhodes said, walking toward the back corner of the garage, "since you're here, let's make this a little more productive." Under a canvas tarp sat a sleek, charcoal-gray Mercedes-Benz AMG S63 coupe. It gleamed despite the dust, a mechanical enigma none of the garage's seasoned staff could get to start. It had been towed in 3 days earlier, and not even Malik, Isaac's go-to tech for electricals, could figure out why it wouldn't power up. "This here's a beauty," Rhodes continued, patting the hood like a man introducing a thoroughbred horse. "Only problem? It's dead. Stone cold. Diagnostics failed to load. Ignition won't catch. 5 of my best across 3 shops couldn't make sense of it." He turned back toward Ava with a theatrical flourish. "What do you say, genius? Want to give it a try? Or are you just pretending to be your daddy's little assistant?" Isaac stepped forward, furious. "Rhodes, that's enough. She's just a—" "No," Rhodes said, raising a hand. "Let her answer." Ava looked from her father to Rhodes, then to the Mercedes. Her brain was already ticking. She'd seen the car when it came in. She'd walked past it twice and noted the model's system on the dash. She remembered reading about it. Some new anti-theft tech involving coded digital signatures. Most garages hadn't caught up to it yet. "What happens if I'm right?" she asked, surprising even herself with the calmness in her voice. Rhodes raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? If I can figure out what's wrong with the car, then what?" Laughter rippled around the garage, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of laugh meant to keep someone small. "If you can solve it," Rhodes said, his tone turning serious, "this garage stays open. No layoffs, bonuses for the team. But if you fail—" He let the silence drag. "I shut this place down by the end of the week." Gasps. Protests. But Rhodes was already turning away. "Let the girl try. It'll be entertaining at least." Ava felt her father's hand grip her shoulder. "You don't have to do this." She turned to him, eyes steady. "Dad, I've seen this engine's blueprint in your old Mercedes manuals. I've read about its security modules. I think I know what's wrong." Isaac searched her face for doubt. There was none. "You're 13, Ava." "And I'm ready." Rhodes grinned like a man watching a house of cards about to fall. "You heard her. The princess accepts." Ava stepped forward as the crew reluctantly parted ways, creating a half circle around her and the Mercedes. She felt every stare like heat on her back. Samir stood with crossed arms, clearly disapproving. Ellie bit her nails. She crouched beside the car and gently ran her fingers along the seams of the hood before popping it open. Everything inside gleamed. Too clean, too untouched. No sign of corrosion, no disconnected cables. She took a breath and looked deeper. This wasn't about fixing an engine anymore. This was about proving she belonged. With the silence of the garage closing in around her, Ava reached for her tablet from her backpack and connected it to the car's interface through the auxiliary port. Her fingers flew across the screen, opening diagnostic protocols she wasn't supposed to know. Her lips moved in quiet thought, eyes darting between readings, each number and voltage a piece of a puzzle forming in her mind. Someone scoffed behind her. "She's just guessing." "No," whispered Ellie. "She's scanning." And she was, with surgical precision, the ignition system, the fuel relay, the onboard processor. Then, there it was, the digital lock. Ava's hands stilled. Her heart, however, was racing. She turned toward Rhodes, who was sipping a cappuccino someone had handed him like this was dinner theater. "I need a laptop with admin access and internet." Rhodes raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "To reprogram the control module. It's rejecting the ignition because the signature doesn't match." "The what now?" one of the mechanics asked. "It's like a digital fingerprint," Ava explained, standing now. "If the car's computer thinks a part was replaced without authorization, it disables itself. That's why it won't start." Rhodes waved a dismissive hand. "Sounds like YouTube nonsense." "Then prove me wrong," Ava said, fire finally flashing behind her calm exterior. "Let me try." The garage stood still for a beat too long. Then Samir spoke. "Let her." Rhodes turned. "Excuse me? If she's wrong, you shut us down anyway. If she's right, you've got a working $140,000 car. What have you got to lose?" Rhodes's smile faltered. He looked around the garage and found too many eyes not looking away. "Fine," he said at last. 15 minutes. Then the circus ends." Ava nodded, unshaken. She already knew she wouldn't need more than 10. Ava pulled her chair closer to the Mercedes and set her laptop on the workbench beside the hood. The air was tense, thick with grease, sweat, and the unspoken thoughts of grown men watching a child take command of something none of them could fix. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Her fingers began flying across the keyboard as if they had their own agenda, connecting to the car's interface like she had done it 100 times before, because in truth, she had. The room remained silent except for the low hum of the laptop fan and the occasional hiss of compressed air somewhere in the background. Ava's eyes didn't leave the screen. She opened the diagnostics panel and bypassed the default interface, navigating directly into the encrypted modules. That's when Ellie, still chewing on her lip, whispered to Samir, "She's not guessing, is she?" Samir shook his head slowly, watching the girl with a furrowed brow. "No," he said, his voice a mixture of confusion and admiration. "She's building a trace path, like she's done it before." But none of them knew she had. For the last 6 months, Ava had been spending her afternoons after school poring over every technical manual she could find in her father's locked cabinet. She had memorized error codes and cross-referenced manufacturers' software updates. What others saw as overwhelming systems and circuits, she saw as language, patterns, logic, truths hiding in plain sight. And then there were the nights. After her father fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from another 12-hour shift, Ava would plug her tablet into the shop's diagnostics computer and dig through logs of unsolved cases, quietly, carefully, never leaving a trace. One night, 2 months ago, she discovered something strange. A consistent failure across a series of high-end vehicles all connected to Rhodes's garages. The same engine models, the same module errors, the same exact shutdown sequence. She hadn't said anything then. She thought no one would believe her. But now, with her father's job on the line and the spotlight directly on her, silence wasn't an option anymore. She tapped a few keys and brought up a series of logs. Error code 0049C. Unregistered digital signature. Engine lockdown initiated. There it was again, the exact same failure she'd documented in 17 other vehicles. Ava sat back for a moment adjusting her glasses, then opened a private folder she had labeled X Shutdown Theory. Inside were weeks of screenshots, technical breakdowns, and a handwritten list of vehicle VINs. All showed the same pattern, a control module that stopped working exactly 90 days after first ignition. It wasn't random. It was code. "What's she doing now?" asked Rhodes, impatiently tapping his phone against his palm. "She's verifying checksum values," Ellie said hesitantly, having read about it once during her brief internship orientation. Rhodes looked at her like she'd just recited witchcraft. "She's bluffing," he muttered. Ava ignored him. Her concentration never wavered. This wasn't about bluffing. This was her domain. She cross-referenced the Mercedes module ID with the internal data set she'd built. A match, down to the firmware version. Her heart skipped. Her theory was about to go live. She opened the system override panel. "Dad," she called softly without taking her eyes off the screen. Isaac, still frozen like a statue beside the tool rack, blinked as if waking from a dream. "Yeah? Remember when I told you I was reading your manuals just for fun?" He nodded cautiously. "I wasn't just reading, I was testing stuff. In the diagnostic system, I've been studying the security architecture." "What are you talking about?" "I think—" "No, I know this car's module has been programmed to fail after a specific usage threshold. Not because it's faulty, because someone wants it to fail." The words hit like a wrench dropped on concrete. Rhodes raised his eyebrows, laughing. "Are you suggesting Mercedes engineers are sabotaging their own cars now? Cute." "No," Ava said, finally looking up at him. "I'm saying someone inserted code that causes these control modules to invalidate themselves after 90 days. And I'm saying it's not a bug. It's a feature, meant to trigger expensive repairs no one knows how to fix. The mechanics murmured among themselves. Samir took a cautious step forward. "Wait, you've seen this before?" "Yes," Ava nodded. "In 17 other cars, all high-end, all failed the same way, all towed to shops owned by Rhodes Automotive Group." "You're full of it," Rhodes snapped, now clearly rattled. "You're a child playing spy." Ava turned the laptop screen so everyone could see. She displayed the logs side by side, with the VINs blurred for privacy but the failure timelines visible. "This is no game." Samir leaned over, scanning the logs. His brow creased. This isn't normal. The time to failure is identical across different models. That's impossible unless it was designed that way." Ava finished. She brought up the signature emulator, software she had pieced together over the past month from open-source projects and sheer determination. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to trick the module into accepting a reset command. She began the reprogramming process. "It's going to take a few minutes," she muttered. "But once the control module accepts the new signature, the engine should start." Rhodes was pacing now, eyes darting between her and the growing crowd forming near the bay doors. A few customers had wandered in, drawn by the commotion. One of them, a man in a business suit, started recording on his phone. "Turn that off," Rhodes barked. "Freedom of information, man," the customer shot back. Back at the workstation, Ava entered the final override sequence. The screen flashed green. Signature authenticated. Module rebooting. She reached for the key fob and, with one breath held tightly in her chest, pressed the ignition button. The engine roared to life. It wasn't just starting, it purred. Clean, smooth, effortless. The sound of it filled the garage like a miracle wrapped in pistons and pride. Gasps. Cheers. Silence. Then more cheers. Ava sat back in her chair, her hands trembling slightly, but her face calm. Rhodes looked like he'd been sucker-punched by a ghost. That's not possible," he whispered. But it was. Because Ava Reed had just done what none of his experts could. She hadn't just fixed the car, she'd exposed the crack in the system. Isaac was speechless. He stared at his daughter, at the running car, then at Rhodes, and suddenly something shifted behind his eyes. It wasn't just pride, it was recognition. Recognition that his daughter had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. Samir clapped slowly. "Kid, I don't know what planet you came from, but we're lucky you landed here." Ellie beamed. "That was awesome." Rhodes, however, wasn't done. "You hacked that system," he growled, pointing a trembling finger. "You violated proprietary software. That's illegal." Ava didn't flinch. "Then call the police." She reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. "But before you do, maybe look at what I found. Email chains, memos, internal directives. Someone's been instructing mechanics across your garages to avoid digital diagnostics. Label problems as unfixable after 48 hours. There's even a line that says, push blame to aging components. Ring any bells?" Rhodes's face turned ghostly pale. "How did you—" "I looked," Ava said, quietly but firmly. "That's all. I looked where you didn't think anyone would." Around them, people had stopped just watching. They were now listening. The customer with the phone was live streaming. The mechanics were backing away from Rhodes and moving closer to Ava. It was subtle, but the shift in allegiance was unmistakable. For the first time, Rhodes was not the center of power in this garage. Ava was. And the girl with oil on her hands and fire in her eyes had just lit the match that would burn down everything he had built on deception. But she wasn't done yet. Not even close. Ava closed the engine hood with a calm finality, the sound echoing through the silent garage like a gavel hitting the bench. The Mercedes purred behind her, the idling engine now more than just a machine. It was proof. Proof of everything she had suspected, everything she had studied, and everything no one else had dared to question. She didn't even allow herself to smile. Not yet. Rhodes stood rooted in place, pale and visibly sweating, his mouth parting and closing as if trying to summon a defense. Around him, the mood had shifted like tectonic plates cracking. The employees who had once lowered their gazes in his presence were now watching him with something close to suspicion. Resentment, even. Ava walked back to her laptop and started organizing her tabs. Samir and Ellie hovered close, neither saying a word but both clearly rattled by the revelation. Her fingers moved methodically, pulling up screenshots, cross-referencing timestamps, and preparing what she knew would be the next phase. Exposure. Isaac finally spoke. "Where did you learn all this?" His voice was rough with disbelief and something deeper. Guilt. Ava turned toward him. Her expression wasn't smug. It was serious. "Every day after school, every night while you were asleep on the couch, I used your manuals, your diagnostic tools. I watched what you and the others did. I listened when you said something didn't make sense, and then I tried to find the patterns that no one else saw." Isaac rubbed his face, stunned. "You hacked our system?" "I didn't damage anything," she said quickly. "I just accessed logs, connected the dots. I wasn't trying to be reckless, I just knew something wasn't right, and I needed to understand why." Samir leaned in. "You said 17 other cars. That's not just coincidence. That's deliberate." "It is," Ava nodded. "They were all coded to fail." Ellie swallowed hard. "But why? Why would anyone design something to break on purpose?" Ava turned her laptop so they could see. "Because there's money in failure." On the screen were screenshots of internal company communications, emails, internal documents, flagged memos, all traced back to Rhodes's corporate system. Ava had found them through backdoor diagnostics tools embedded in the workshop's software. It had taken weeks to compile the fragments piece by piece, like a digital jigsaw puzzle, until the image became impossible to ignore. Rhodes snapped. "You're bluffing. That's corporate property. You had no authorization to, and you had no right to commit fraud." Ava cut him off, the words coming sharper than before. "You didn't just let these cars fail. You made them fail. And when customers brought them in, you told your mechanics to stop at traditional diagnostics. Never suggest reprogramming. Never check the software signature. You told them to declare the vehicles unfixable." "Lies," Rhodes barked, though his voice had lost its edge. "Then explain this." Ava clicked another tab. Up popped a spreadsheet of repurchase orders. Each car that had suffered the same shutdown was bought back by Rhodes Auto Group for a fraction of the resale price. Cars customers had all but given up on. And within weeks, those same vehicles were refurbished and sold under new listings, with enormous markups. "You made thousands," Ava said, her tone almost cold. "Tens of thousands, maybe more. But it wasn't just about profit. You did it at the cost of our reputation. My dad's, Samir's, Jake's. You made them look incompetent while you lined your pockets." Samir's hands balled into fists. "All those nights. The stress. We thought we were missing something. We blamed ourselves." Rhodes scoffed. "You're really going to believe a child? A hacker?" "I'm not asking them to believe me," Ava replied, eyes never leaving his. "I'm showing them the truth." She clicked once more, and the garage's wide TV flickered to life. The screen displayed a screen recording, a full 30-minute segment showing Ava walking through the diagnostic system, pulling up logs, explaining each step. It had already been uploaded, time-stamped, verified. And then, the final blow. Ava opened a folder labeled Audio Evidence. The voices were unmistakable, conversations between Rhodes and his district managers discussing controlled failures, non-disclosure to technicians, and pushing the narrative of hardware malfunction. Every file was marked with a date and location. Each one was damning. "I had access to more than just diagnostics," Ava said calmly. "Your servers were lazy. You never changed default credentials. I didn't break in. You left the door open." By now, more phones were out. Several of the younger mechanics had begun filming. The air was electric with revelation, with betrayal turned into justice. Rhodes seemed to shrink in real time, his expensive shirt damp at the collar, hands shaking slightly. Isaac stepped forward. "You let us waste hours, days. You let our customers walk away angry, thinking we were fools. You cost me good men, people who quit thinking they weren't cut out for this work." I didn't plan all of this," Rhodes stammered. "It was a business strategy, temporary." "No," Ava corrected him. "It was deception. And you underestimated me because I'm young, because I'm a girl, because I'm not what you expected." Then she looked at her dad. "That's the part that hurt most. I waited. I waited for someone to see it, to stop it. But you all kept trusting the system, even when it lied." Isaac opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes brimmed with a mix of shame and awe. Rhodes made one last move. "This was unauthorized access. Illegal. You hacked a corporate network. I'll sue. You'll be charged. Your father will lose everything." "No," Samir said, stepping between Rhodes and Ava. "You're going to lose everything." Ellie raised her phone. "We're still live. Thousands are watching." Rhodes froze. "I turned on the live stream when I started diagnostics," Ava admitted, "because I knew you'd try to bury this. I wanted the world to see." The TV behind her updated again, showing the stream. 8,942 viewers. The comments scrolled like wildfire. "This is bigger than just one shop. Call the feds. I paid $6K for a repair that never worked. This girl is a genius. Who's that coward in the tie?" A loud knock broke the moment. 3 uniformed officers stood at the entrance. "Calvin Rhodes?" one of them asked firmly. Rhodes barely nodded before his arms were gently but firmly pulled behind his back. "You have the right to remain silent." He didn't resist. He couldn't. As he was escorted out, the entire garage watched, not in silence but in vindication. Justice didn't always come swiftly, but today it had arrived wearing work boots and a school backpack. Ava sat down slowly, her fingers suddenly heavy with adrenaline withdrawal. Her father knelt beside her. "You didn't just save my job," he whispered. "You saved our names." "I didn't do it for that," she said softly. "I did it because someone had to." A pause. Then, "Am I in trouble?" He laughed, just once, but it was full of emotion. "Probably, but we'll face it together." Samir clapped a hand on her shoulder. "Kid, you've got steel in your veins." "Steel and syntax," Ellie added, beaming. The engine of the Mercedes still idled behind them, humming like a song of vindication. And Ava? She wasn't done. Not even close. Ava sat quietly at the workbench as the officers drove Rhodes away, their squad car disappearing into the heat-warped haze of late afternoon. The garage, once a cacophony of clanks and whirs, now felt like a chapel in the middle of a stunned congregation. No one quite knew what to say. They just watched her, this 13-year-old girl in oversized gloves, her laptop still humming, her curls slightly frizzed from the heat, and her fingers smeared with grease and truth. But Ava didn't want applause. Not yet. Not ever, really. She wanted change. She wanted answers. And above all, she wanted this to matter. Samir finally broke the silence. "So, what happens now?" Ava didn't look up. She was still organizing files, encrypting data, labeling audio clips. "We make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug." "You already posted the stream," Ellie said, voice low. "Isn't that enough?" Ava shook her head. "Streams disappear. News cycles move fast. But digital evidence, code, emails, metadata, that sticks. We're not just exposing one man. We're proving an entire network exists. A system built on planned failure." She clicked open a new tab and started typing a subject line for an email. "To whom it may concern. Evidence of engineered automotive sabotage." Attached were compressed folders, logs, recordings, VINs, comparative failure timelines, and internal memos. Samir stepped closer. "Who are you sending that to?" "Federal Trade Commission." National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, a few journalists, one lawyer I found who specializes in class action suits. You really did your homework, Isaac said, both proud and vaguely terrified. I didn't come this far to stop halfway, Ava replied. She hit send. In that moment, a symbolic weight lifted, like a transmission locking into gear at just the right moment. The evidence was out. No more secrets, no more gatekeepers. And then her phone buzzed. It was a notification from the livestream app. The archived video had passed 250,000 views. And it was only 6:17 p.m. The news had spread like gasoline, finding a spark. Isaac picked up the remote and turned the garage's TV to a local news station. A headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Mechanic's daughter uncovers multi-shop auto scam. CEO arrested for fraud. There she was, on screen, frozen mid-sentence during her explanation of the digital signature bypass. Her name, her face, her courage, all now public. You're a national story, sweetheart, her father whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. Ava looked up and smiled, but it was weary. Good, now they have to listen. But not everyone was ready to celebrate. Jake, one of the younger mechanics, stepped out of the shadows, his brows furrowed. So, what happens to us? He asked. We followed orders, we missed stuff. People think we were in on it. You were misled, Ava said gently. And you were afraid. That's not a crime, but doing nothing, now that you know, that would be. Ellie added, We should come forward too, as a team. Show the public we weren't complicit. Ava nodded. Testimonies, affidavits, timeline statements. We document everything we were told to do and not to do. I can help format it. Isaac smiled. You're 13, and you talk like a lawyer. She glanced at him, half joking, half serious. Maybe one day. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a notification. It was a call. The screen flashed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code matched Seattle. Should I answer? She asked her dad. He nodded. Hello? Ava said cautiously, putting the phone on speaker. A smooth, confident voice answered. Is this Ava Reed? Yes. My name is Jordan Valdez. I work with Gridline Ventures. We're a tech innovation firm that scouts exceptional youth talent in the engineering space. We saw your live stream. And your work? It's brilliant. Revolutionary, actually. Ava blinked. Jordan continued. We'd love to invite you to present your findings at the Northwest Innovator Summit next month. It's attended by companies like Tesla, Rivian, and Microsoft. And Ava, you'll have an audience, a real one. Ellie squealed and covered her mouth. Samir just whistled low. Wow, Ava managed. Talk to your parents, Jordan added. But we'll cover your trip, your lodging, and if you're interested, our team would like to mentor you further. You have the potential to change the industry. Ava smiled, but this time it felt real. Thank you, she said. I'll talk to my dad and call you back soon. When the call ended, everyone stared at her, dumbfounded. I didn't even apply for anything, she murmured. You didn't have to, Samir said. You showed up, and that counts more than any application. As the garage slowly returned to motion, conversations hummed, tools were picked up again, and a cautious energy filled the air. Like the moment after a long storm, no longer thunder, but the smell of rain-soaked ground and the sense that something had shifted for good. But Ava wasn't ready to leave just yet. She returned to the car, opened her laptop again, and started writing. A letter. To the customers whose cars had failed. To the mechanics who had been shamed. To the girls in schools who were told they didn't belong in STEM. It read, We didn't miss the problem. We were taught not to see it. But once you do see it, you can't unsee it. And that's how change begins. As she saved the file, Ellie leaned over. So, what do you call all this? This whole takedown, investigation, hero girl moment? Ava thought for a moment. Then she looked at the Mercedes, still quietly idling. "I call it fixing what's broken," she said. Isaac smiled, putting a hand on her shoulder. "You're not just a mechanic's daughter anymore, Ava." She looked at him and answered simply, "I never was just that." Outside, the golden hour sun washed the sidewalk in light, and down the block someone had taped a printed-out screenshot of the live stream on a streetlight pole. Ava Reed, the girl who reprogrammed the truth. She took one final look at her laptop screen, then powered it down. Tomorrow, she would prepare her talk for the summit. Tonight, she would walk home with her father, tired but finally walking side by side. And somewhere in the city, other little girls in baggy jeans and dusty sneakers were watching the news, their minds lighting up with the realization. Maybe they weren't too small. Maybe the world had just been looking the wrong way. Ava smiled to herself, letting the thought settle in her bones like a song only she could hear. They wouldn't see her coming next time either, and that, she thought, was exactly the point. Ava stood by the bay door of the garage the next morning, the sunlight streaming through the open frame, casting long shadows across the oil-stained floor. The Mercedes was gone, towed overnight by the police as evidence, and Rhodes's nameplate had been removed from the front office door. For the first time in years, Apex Auto Garage felt like it belonged to the people who actually worked there. But that didn't mean everything was easy. News vans lined the curb outside, journalists pressed against the windows. Customers flooded their phones demanding answers. And inside the garage, the crew gathered like soldiers after battle, faces drawn, shoulders tight, unsure of what would come next. Ava walked into the center of the floor, laptop under one arm, her father beside her. Ellie, Samir, Jake, and a few other mechanics, some still shocked, some starting to feel proud, waited, silently asking her with their eyes, "What now?" She took a breath and spoke. "I know things are moving fast. I know some of you didn't ask to be part of this, but we don't get to pretend this didn't happen, not after everything we've seen." Jake stepped forward, rubbing the back of his neck. "The live stream hit over 5 million views. My cousin from Dallas called me last night, said he saw my face on TikTok." Samir smirked. "You always wanted to be famous." Jake didn't laugh. He looked at Ava. "It's not just internet drama, is it?" "No," she said firm. "It's fraud. It's systemic. It's not just Rhodes. It's everyone who let this happen. Everyone who signed those documents, collected those commissions, looked the other way while customers were lied to and workers were blamed." Ellie chimed in. "We need to go on the record, not just with journalists, with the law." "I agree," Ava said, placing her laptop on the center table. "And I have a plan." She opened a file titled Mechanic Witness Statements and turned the screen so the group could see. It was a form she'd designed herself. Fields for timestamps, vehicle IDs, repair notes, technician comments, manager overrides. She'd modeled it after whistleblower templates she found online, stripping away the legal jargon so anyone could fill it out. "Each of you who was told to stop investigating a repair, write it down. If you ever heard someone say, 'Don't escalate this,' or 'Just log it as unfixable,' write it down. This is our evidence now, together." There was a pause. The group stared at the screen. Then Jake stepped forward, took the mouse, and clicked Add New Entry. One by one, the others followed. An hour later, the file had 12 entries. 12 stories of suppressed diagnostics, deliberate misdirection, emails left unanswered, customers turned away. And they weren't just damning. They were human. "My customer was a single mom," Jake wrote. "Her SUV wouldn't start after 91 days. She cried in the waiting area because she couldn't get her kid to daycare. I didn't know it was sabotage. I thought I just failed. I spent 2 nights trying to fix a code that didn't make sense." Samir typed. "I thought maybe I was getting too old for this. Turns out I just didn't have the full truth." Ava read each submission silently, her throat tightening. These weren't just testimonies. They were confessions. Not of guilt, but of burden. Finally lifted. At noon, she hit Submit, and sent the full document to the federal investigator who had contacted her that morning. She also blind copied 3 consumer watchdog journalists who were already running stories. Her hands trembled slightly as she hit send. Not from fear, but from weight. A kind of gravity only truth can create. As she stood up, her father came over, placing a hand gently on her back. "You didn't have to do all this, you know." Ava looked at him, a little amused. "You think I could have stopped even if I tried?" He chuckled. "Guess not." Then Ellie burst in from the lot, holding her phone high. "You guys need to see this." They gathered around. A live stream from a national news network was playing, an emergency press conference from Rhodes Automotive Group's headquarters. The new interim CEO, a woman in a conservative suit and serious expression, stood at a podium. "We were made aware of allegations involving engineered failures in our repair network. After internal review, we've discovered preliminary evidence supporting these claims. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities. Calvin Rhodes has been officially removed from the board and will face a range of civil and criminal charges." Reporters shouted questions. "Is it true a child uncovered this? Will customers be reimbursed? Is this the biggest automotive fraud since the emissions scandal?" The CEO didn't answer them all, but one statement stood out. "To the young woman who exposed this, on behalf of everyone affected, we are grateful. You've reminded us that truth doesn't care about age or titles." Samir whooped. Jake high-fived Ellie, but Ava just stood quietly, the noise washing over her like distant thunder, because it wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. That afternoon, more messages flooded in. A state senator wanted to speak to her about legislation. A law firm wanted her help organizing a class action suit. A tech company wanted to consult her on diagnostic encryption. And a middle school robotics team from Utah sent her a video of their all-girls crew cheering, holding a sign that read, "Ava fixed the system. Now we'll build something better." Ava couldn't help but smile. Her voice had echoed far beyond the garage, and it was inspiring a movement. That night, she sat on her bedroom floor, her laptop open, her cat snuggled on her lap. Her phone buzzed again, another unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Miss Reed," the voice said warmly. "My name is Dr. Priya Kessler. I'm with the National Academy of Engineering. We'd like to formally invite you to our Youth Advisory Council." Ava blinked. "I'm not even in high school yet." "That's exactly why we want you. You're not just changing how people see engineering. You're changing who gets to be part of it." When the call ended, Ava leaned back, the room glowing softly in the evening light. Her mother peeked in, eyebrows raised. "Is this another $1 million opportunity I should know about?" Ava laughed. "Not this time, just a national committee." Her mom grinned, walked in, and kissed the top of her head. "You okay, baby?" "I think so." "You sure?" Ava paused. "It's just a lot." Her mom nodded. "That's what happens when you tell the truth in a world built on silence." As the stars blinked to life above the rooftops, Ava opened a new document titled Blueprint for Change, a guide to ethical diagnostics for independent garages. She didn't need permission. She didn't need a degree. She just needed what she already had: data, truth, and a voice strong enough to use both. She typed her first sentence. "This isn't just a manual for machines. It's a manual for people who refuse to look away." And in a garage across town, a mechanic who once questioned her now printed out her witness form, hung it on the wall, and whispered, "We almost missed her." But they hadn't. And the world never would again. 6 weeks had passed since the scandal broke. 6 weeks since Calvin Rhodes had been led out of Apex Auto Garage in handcuffs, and since Ava's face had flashed across every major news outlet, dubbed everything from the garage genius to the girl who exposed an empire. The media frenzy had softened slightly, the headlines replaced by newer crises and flashier controversies. But inside the garage, now renamed Reed and Coding Tech Garage, the momentum hadn't died. It had only evolved. What once was just a place for oil changes and worn brake pads was now a living, breathing hub of innovation. Ava walked through the bay that morning, nodding at the freshly painted walls and gleaming new diagnostic machines. The air smelled less like desperation and more like promise. They'd received grants from several tech firms, donations from civic groups, and dozens of offers of support from educators and engineers nationwide. But the greatest transformation wasn't in the machines, it was in the people. Samir now led weekly training workshops. Only this time he didn't hide the things he didn't know. Instead, he opened each session with a line Ava had once said to him, "You don't need to be perfect to be prepared." Ellie had designed a mentorship program that paired experienced techs with neighborhood kids. Even Jake, once a self-doubting junior mechanic, had started experimenting with a new line of hybrid diagnostic tools Ava had mocked up. As for Ava, she didn't slow down. She couldn't. While other teens were scrolling TikTok, she was building frameworks for encrypted diagnostic transparency, creating a cloud-based platform called Clear Core that would allow independent garages to detect manufacturer manipulation before it hurt real people. It wasn't just a tool, it was a shield. On a Thursday morning, Ava stood in what had once been a cluttered storage room and was now her lab, an organized, humming workspace with 3 monitors, 2 open-engine cores, and a whiteboard filled with data streams, error codes, and algorithmic sketches. Isaac knocked before stepping in. "You've got a visitor." Ava turned, pulling off her gloves. "Another journalist." "Worse," he said, smiling. "A politician." She sighed and rolled her eyes but followed him anyway. In the main bay stood Councilwoman Adela Marsh, wearing a crisp navy suit and an expression both impressed and slightly overwhelmed. She extended her hand to Ava. "You're younger than I imagined. And you're taller than I expected," Ava replied, shaking her hand. Marsh laughed. "I'll take that." She glanced around the garage. "This place, it's different, more alive." "That's what happens when people stop being afraid to ask questions," Ava said. Marsh nodded. "And it's exactly why we're here. The city is launching a new Youth Innovation Fellowship. We want you to help design it, and maybe even lead it." Ava blinked. "Lead?" "Not alone. We'll assemble a council, diverse, curious, brilliant. But you'll be the blueprint, the model." It was an offer that might have scared most kids, but Ava only nodded slowly. "If I do it, I want workshops hosted here, and not just for kids who can afford it. For the ones who've been told they're not smart enough to matter." Marsh smiled. Spoken like someone who knows what that feels like. Later that day, Ava sat with her dad in the office, now furnished with a modest conference table, a shared computer, and a wall of framed newspaper clippings that Isaac insisted on keeping. One headline stood out in particular. "The girl who rewired the truth." He pointed at it. "They don't even mention me." "You had a good run," Ava teased. He grinned, then turned serious. "You okay, kiddo?" "I'm tired," she admitted. "But good tired. Like after a long hike where you finally see the view." Isaac leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "You know, I used to think fixing cars was just about parts. Diagnostics, turning bolts, but you fixed something bigger. You fixed the way we see things." Ava glanced at him. "You didn't do so bad yourself." He chuckled. "Let's not get carried away." A chime sounded from her laptop. She walked over and opened it, finding a message from a high school student in Detroit. "I saw your live stream. My brother and I built a little workshop in our backyard. We're trying to replicate the digital signature exploit you showed. We didn't even know that kind of tech existed for people like us. Thank you." Ava responded immediately, offering resources and a Zoom link for the weekend. Every day brought more of these. Messages from girls in small towns, immigrant families in apartment basements, kids building robots out of junkyard parts. And every time she replied, because she remembered how alone it felt to be brilliant in silence. The next morning, Ava hosted a session for a dozen local middle schoolers. They arrived shy, unsure, some still rubbing sleep from their eyes. She handed out kits, circuits, tablets, microchips, and got to work. By the end of 2 hours, one girl had successfully simulated a faulty ignition relay, and another had modified Ava's code to improve its error prediction rate. "You guys are insane," Ellie whispered, eyes wide. "They're not insane," Ava said, smiling. "They're what happens when no one tells you to stop trying." Meanwhile, across town, Calvin Rhodes sat in a worn recliner in his one-bedroom apartment, watching a rerun of Ava's latest interview. He looked older now, smaller. His once perfect hair was thinning, and the shine in his eyes had dulled to something brittle and cracked. The court had sentenced him to 18 months of house arrest and a $500,000 restitution fine. His wife had filed for divorce 2 weeks after his arrest. His old life, the deals, the dinners, the power, had vanished like a mirage. He reached for the remote, but paused as Ava's voice came through the screen. "I didn't do this to destroy anyone. I did it to rebuild something better. The goal was never revenge, it was repair." He scoffed, but his hand dropped to his lap, because deep down, he knew. He hadn't just underestimated her, he'd never even seen her, and now the world did. Back at the garage, Ava added another section to ClearCore, a new feature. She called it Echo. It tracked reported failures across thousands of garages, mapping patterns, aggregating data in real time, and flagging suspicious clusters. Within weeks, mechanics from around the country began submitting anomalies, some small, some deeply concerning, and together they were building a network. One mechanic in Ohio sent a note. "Used to think I was just missing stuff. Now I realize I was being played. Thanks for showing us." Ava smiled. The revolution wasn't noisy anymore. It was steady, focused, precise. That night, she walked to the edge of the roof behind the garage. The city lights flickered like a constellation of opportunities. Her mom joined her, handing her a cup of hot chocolate. "You're not the same girl who started all this," her mom said. "No," Ava agreed. "I'm stronger now, and louder." Her mom wrapped an arm around her. "Just don't forget to rest." "I will. But not tonight. Tonight, I'm going to write the first chapter of the ClearCore handbook." Her mom raised an eyebrow. "A handbook? For who?" "For the kids who come next. The ones who'll fix things I can't even imagine yet." Ava sipped her hot chocolate and looked up at the stars. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything. 3 months later, Ava stood on a stage in a sleek auditorium in downtown Seattle, her palms cool against the sides of the podium. Rows of engineers, investors, startup founders, and STEM educators filled the seats before her. Behind her, the title slide of her keynote presentation glowed on a massive screen. Integrity in Diagnostics: How One Fault Can Expose a System. The lights dimmed slightly as Ava adjusted the microphone. At 13, she looked both impossibly young and oddly ageless, composed, clear-eyed, with a voice that had learned to slice through disbelief like a blade. 3 months ago, she began. I stood in a garage with a wrench in one hand and a system stacked against me. I wasn't supposed to be right. I wasn't supposed to understand the code. I wasn't even supposed to be there. A murmur of recognition passed through the crowd. Many of them had followed her story, seen the live streams, read the op-eds. But the truth doesn't care about who's supposed to know it. The truth just waits for someone to notice it. And I noticed something. Vehicles that shouldn't be failing were failing, on schedule. Diagnostics that should have worked were silenced. And the people trying to fix them? They were being blamed, over and over, for problems they were never allowed to solve. She clicked the remote, and a graph appeared. Lines of failure reports, perfectly aligned in 90-day increments across multiple cities. "This," she said, "wasn't bad luck. It was bad intention. But once we saw the pattern, we didn't just fix a car, we started fixing everything." The crowd leaned in. Ava took them through the ClearCore interface, showed them how her system flagged anomalies in real time, how it cross-referenced failure rates against firmware versions, how mechanics could submit cases with full transparency. A panel of Tesla engineers at the front row exchanged glances. Jennifer Walsh, VP of AI Applications at Tesla, nodded to herself, scribbling something in her notebook. "And what's next?" Ava concluded. "Well, that's where you come in, because this isn't just my tool anymore. This is yours, ours, anyone who refuses to let sabotage hide behind complexity." The audience erupted into applause, some on their feet, others shaking their heads in disbelief at the clarity of her delivery. Backstage, Ava stepped down as her dad met her with a quiet, proud grin. "You killed it." "I didn't die," she said, smiling. "So, yeah, I guess I did." They shared a fist bump, one of their newer rituals, and walked together to the reception lounge. The room was buzzing. Executives from Google, Rivian, Microsoft, and several major OEMs approached in waves. Compliments poured in, but Ava filtered them the way a good mechanic filters noise from signal. Then Jennifer Walsh approached, her hand outstretched. "Ava Reed," she said warmly. "That was the most important 20 minutes this industry has heard in a decade." "Thank you, Ms. Walsh." "Jennifer, please." She gestured toward a quiet corner. "Mind if we talk?" Ava nodded, and they walked over to a set of armchairs near the windows overlooking Puget Sound. "We've been following your work closely," Jennifer said. "Not just ClearCore, but your outreach. The way you've built a collaborative diagnostic model. I think you already know this, but we're impressed. Very impressed." Ava shifted in her chair, trying to stay grounded. "I didn't do it alone." "That's even more impressive," Jennifer replied. "You shared credit. You built a community. That's rare." She reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek folder. "This is a proposal for a consulting contract with Tesla. Initial compensation is $2 million. You'd work with our software integrity team on modular transparency protocols. You'd also help design a pilot program for open-source vehicle diagnostics." Ava didn't react right away. She opened the folder, scanned the outline, the legal language, the projections. Then she closed it and looked Jennifer in the eye. "I'm honored," she said slowly, "but I have one condition." Jennifer tilted her head, curious. "I want part of the project developed in my dad's garage, with his team, with Samir, Ellie, and Jake. They helped me when no one else would. They deserve to be part of this story, too." Jennifer didn't hesitate. Agreed. Ava blinked. "Just like that?" "Anyone smart enough to expose a multi-million-dollar fraud at 13, Jennifer said, smiling, "gets to make a few demands." The next week, Ava was back home, sitting cross-legged on the rooftop of her garage beneath the late summer sky. A soft breeze rustled the page of her notebook where she was outlining her next big idea. A certification platform for ethical auto shops. An accountability seal powered by blockchain, accessible to every car owner with a phone. Isaac came up with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "To celebrate," he said. Ava took a mug and raised it slightly. "To rebuilding." As they sipped, Isaac looked out across the neighborhood. "Remember when I told you to play less with wires and more with books?" "I remember," she said, smiling. "You were worried I'd get shocked," he chuckled. "Turns out I was the one who got shocked." Down below, the garage lights were still on. Samir was training a new group of interns. Ellie was coding a user-friendly interface for ClearCore. Jake was testing a mobile version of the diagnostic tablet, and the sign above the garage door, repainted in bold silver letters, read, "Reed and Keogh. Tech Garage Diagnostics. Innovation. Truth." That weekend, Ava gave a talk at a local school. She stood before a gymnasium full of kids, some still in Spider-Man backpacks, others in hoodies and worn sneakers. They weren't engineers, not yet, but their eyes lit up with something Ava recognized. Curiosity, hunger, quiet defiance. During the Q&A, a girl with braids raised her hand. "What gave you the courage to stand up to someone so powerful?" Ava thought for a second, then said, "He was more powerful. He had money, a company, influence, but he made one mistake. He confused power with intelligence, and he confused my age and my face with weakness." She let the silence hang. When you underestimate someone, you give them the greatest advantage, the element of surprise. Another hand shot up. A boy near the back. "What if you had failed?" Ava nodded. "That would have hurt, but I wouldn't have stopped, because I didn't start this to win. I started it to fix something that was wrong. And even if I failed that day, I would have kept going, until I didn't." The gym burst into applause, but Ava didn't soak it in. She looked at the girl with braids, at the boy near the back, at the faces watching her like she was holding open a door they hadn't known existed, and in that moment, she knew. This was the real work. Not the summit, not the media, but this, being visible, being honest, and leaving the door wide open behind her. Afterward, the principal pulled her aside. "We've never seen the students so focused. You gave them something real." Ava smiled. "They already had it. I just reminded them." Back at the garage that evening, Ava updated her site with a new blog entry. She titled it, "The Power of Being Underestimated." She wrote, "People will always try to measure your value based on what they think you are. Let them. While they waste time judging, you build. While they laugh, you learn. And when they finally look again, you'll already be miles ahead. So don't waste time begging to be seen. Be so good they can't look away." And just as she hit publish, her phone buzzed with a notification. New message from MIT. Full scholarship invitation to early engineering program. Ava exhaled, leaned back in her chair, and grinned. She wasn't done, not even close. 2 years later, the world had changed, but perhaps not as much as Ava Reed had. Now, 15, she walked through the bustling halls of MIT like a girl who belonged there, even if she technically wasn't supposed to be there yet. The university had made an exception, a rare one, for a student whose name had become synonymous with innovation, integrity, and transformation in the automotive industry. While others in her cohort were learning to code, Ava was already consulting on real-time diagnostic systems used in over 2,000 repair shops nationwide. ClearCore had expanded beyond anyone's expectations, and with the help of a small, passionate team based at her father's garage back home, she had turned a tool into a movement. But what stayed with her, always, were the people, the ones who had been overlooked, dismissed, underestimated, just like she had been. That's why she never stopped responding to messages. One day, in early spring, as cherry blossoms began to bloom along the Charles River, Ava was invited to speak at a high school just outside of Boston. The request had come from a STEM teacher who had been using Ava's story as a teaching module. When she arrived, the school auditorium was full. Students filled every seat, their phones out, some of them whispering as Ava walked to the stage. She wore jeans and a hoodie, nothing flashy, nothing to distract from what she was about to say. "I know what some of you are thinking," she began, microphone steady in her hand. "That I'm some kind of genius, or that I got lucky, or that maybe you could never do what I did." She paused, letting the murmurs die down. "But here's the truth. I'm not special because I figured out how to fix a car. I'm not even special because I uncovered fraud. I'm just someone who paid attention, who refused to ignore a pattern that didn't make sense. What made me different wasn't talent. It was courage." A hand shot up in the second row. A boy, 14, his voice shaky. "But how did you have the courage? That guy was so much more powerful than you. He had a whole system behind him." Ava nodded slowly. She'd heard this question before, but it always struck something deep in her. "He was more powerful," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "He had money, influence, control over people's jobs, including my dad's. But he made a mistake, a big one. He confused power with intelligence, and he confused my age and my skin color with incompetence." Gasps rippled through the audience. "When people do that," she continued, When they look at you and decide who you are before even listening to you, they give you the greatest weapon, the element of surprise. They stop seeing you as a threat, and that's when they become vulnerable. Another girl raised her hand. But what if you had failed? Ava smiled. I thought about that, a lot, but here's what I realized. I couldn't fail, because I already knew the answer before the challenge ever came. I had studied. I had tested. I had done the work in silence. So when my moment came, it wasn't a gamble. It was a reveal. She stepped forward, her sneakers brushing the edge of the stage. The best revenge, she said, isn't tearing people down. It's building yourself so high they can't even reach you with their doubt. A standing ovation followed, not out of obligation, but out of something deeper: respect, belief, hope. Later that night, Ava sat in her dorm, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the smell of gasoline in her dad's garage to the polished labs of MIT, from sabotage in the shadows to stage lights shining on her face, every step had been built on truth. Hard, uncomfortable, powerful truth. Back home, things had changed just as dramatically. Reed & Cohen Tech Garage had become more than a repair shop. It was now a certified training center. Local kids earned scholarships through its programs. Mechanics flew in from across the country to attend Ava's Integrity Workshops, where she taught them not just how to fix, but why. Samir had become the director of curriculum. Ellie now ran ClearCore's community development, and Jake had started a side project creating handheld devices that used Ava's diagnostic model in low-resource areas around the globe. And Isaac? He was exactly where he wanted to be, managing the floor, teaching younger techs, watching his daughter's legacy grow beyond the walls he had once thought would define her. But not everyone had moved on so cleanly. Calvin Rhodes had tried, in his own way, to claw back some form of dignity. After serving his sentence under house arrest, he attempted to re-enter the automotive world, only to be rejected at every turn. The last anyone had seen of him, he'd applied for a consulting role at a mid-sized repair chain in rural Pennsylvania. The owner recognized his name and turned him away before he'd even filled out the paperwork. The system he had once controlled no longer had room for him. The system had changed, because Ava had changed it. But she never saw it as vengeance. She saw it as alignment. The world had needed a correction. She had simply delivered it. One evening, Ava returned home for spring break and stopped by the garage. The place looked different, more polished, more digital, but the soul was the same. She walked through the bays where she had once crouched behind engines, ignored by grown men who didn't think she belonged. Now they looked at her with admiration, and maybe a little fear. Tony, the oldest of the original crew, waved her over. "You know," he said, handing her a wrench, "we still keep your first diagnostic chart on the wall." Ava laughed. "The one where I misspelled ignition?" He nodded. "Yep, proof that even geniuses start with typos." She grinned and took the wrench. "Let's crack open a fuel system, for old time's sake." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Ava sat alone in the garage, staring up at the stars through the open ceiling vent. She thought about all the young people who had written to her, who had built their own diagnostics, started their own movements, launched their own truths. She thought about what it meant to build something that outlasts you. She picked up her notebook, still the same black, spiral-bound one from 2 years ago, and wrote, "Let them laugh. Let them doubt. That's how they waste time. While they do, you study. While they mock, you build. And one day, they'll look up and realize you were already miles ahead." And beneath it, she added, "I didn't fix just one car. I fixed a culture that forgot how to listen." In the end, that was what mattered. Not the fame, not the headlines, not even the $2 million contract. It was the quiet shift in the world, the small ripple of justice becoming a wave of belief. She was no longer just the girl from the garage. She was Ava Reed, and she had rewired the world. Ava's journey teaches us one of the most powerful truths of all. You don't need permission to be brilliant. You only need the courage to act on what you know is right. In a world that often judges us by our age, our background, or the boxes we check on a form, Ava reminded us that strength comes not from status, but from preparation, persistence, and integrity. She didn't wait to be given a seat at the table. She built her own. She faced a corrupt system with only her knowledge, her values, and a laptop. And she won. But her greatest victory wasn't exposing a fraud or signing $1 million contract. It was showing young people everywhere that they are enough, just as they are, to spark change. That no one is too small to stand for the truth. And that when the world underestimates you, that's your greatest opportunity to rise. Her story is a reminder. Do the work in silence, prepare like no one's watching, and when your moment comes, show them everything they missed while they were too busy dismissing you. Where are you watching this story from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We'd love to know where our amazing community is tuning in from. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us of the strength inside us all. Let's keep building a world where courage, truth, and determination lead the way.